Amid the crucible of conflict, Vladimir Putin's surprise Easter truce raises critical questions: a strategic pause or a pathway to peace. While Kiev accuses Moscow of violations, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha recalls a rejected 30-day ceasefire proposal. Meanwhile, reports suggest Washington may consider concessions on Crimea, signaling potential shifts in diplomacy. As artillery fire persists despite declared calm, Europe watches cautiously. Is this fleeting truce a ruse for regrouping or an olive branch amid escalating stakes? I'm Rehan Morsi and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
According to the New York Times, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a temporary Easter truce ordering a halt to military activity in Ukraine from Saturday evening through Sunday. The move appeared aimed at proving to the Trump administration that Moscow was still open to peace talks. The newspaper added that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met the offer with deep skepticism, calling it another manipulative attempt by Putin to play with people's lives. Zelensky said Ukraine's abide so long as Russia did. And if Russia kept fighting, so would Ukraine. Putin's move came a day after the Trump administration made its impatience clear with Russia's reluctance to agree to a proposed 30-day ceasefire. Both Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Donald Trump saying that the U.S. could decide to give up on its quest to end the Russia-Ukraine war if one of the two parties makes it very difficult. On the other hand, Ukrainian President Zelensky has accused Russia of trying to create a misleading impression of a ceasefire during the Easter holiday, despite continued attacks, according to the Washington Post. Zelensky stated that the Russian forces carried out 59 shellings, 5 ground assaults, and numerous drone strikes after Putin announced an Easter truce. The newspaper added that Ukraine has offered to extend the ceasefire for 30 days, but stressed that Russia must fully comply. Meanwhile, Russian installed officials said that Ukrainian forces also continued attacks. Putin offered no detail on how the ceasefire would be monitored or whether it would cover airstrikes or ongoing ground battles. Is Russia's Easter truce a step towards peace or a strategic pause? As skepticism mounts, global powers face mounting pressure to navigate a fragile ceasefire amid shifting diplomatic landscapes.
The sudden 30-hour ceasefire declared by Russian President Vladimir Putin raises critical questions about timing and intent. The move comes as Washington signaled its readiness to abandon stalled peace talks unless both Moscow and Kiev demonstrate willingness to de-escalate. This suggests the external diplomatic pressure may have influenced Putin's decision. However, Ukrainian officials remain skeptical. President Zelensky accused Russia of violating the truce, with artillery fire continuing in frontline areas. Kiev perceives this as a tactical maneuver rather than a genuine gesture for peace. By rejecting the earlier US-backed proposal for a full 30-day ceasefire, Russia underscored its reluctance to engage meaningfully in negotiations. Reports reveal an alarming possibility. The United States considering concessions on Crimea, ceding control to Russia, a significant shift since 2014, when Moscow annexed the peninsula under contested circumstances. Such a move would alienate Ukraine and strain transatlantic unity, particularly if the European Union opposes such terms. European countries greeted Putin's Easter truce with cautious skepticism, expressing doubts about its sincerity and implications. French President Macron called for a meeting of European leaders, highlighting Europe's independence from U.S. efforts. The EU, a key mediator in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, faces challenges in balancing transatlantic unity with strategic autonomy. While some speculate the truce offers breathing room for Russian forces to regroup, others see potential for renewed dialogue. Yet without trust-building measures, the truce risks being merely a time stop before further escalation. For now, the world watches cautiously, aware that any could reignite hostilities with devastating consequences.
To help analyze the most recent updates concerning the Eastern Truce and its connotations, we're joined from Cairo by Mr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist, and from Kiev by Mr. Ivan Us, advisor at Ukraine National Center. Thank you both for joining us here on Think Tank. Let me start off with Mr. Osman. How do you interpret Putin's sudden announcement of the Easter Truce? As some explain, it's an attempt to prove that Russia is willing to engage in peace talks. What's your take on that?
Rehan, greetings to you and to your audience and to the dear guest, Mr. Ivanos. I think that President Putin's unilateral announcement, and rather surprising announcement of a unilateral ceasefire, which is limited by 3 days, on the occasion of the Eastern Christian Easter, basically, is basically a political maneuver by Putin in order to score more credit with President Trump with regards to the ongoing peace efforts. As we know, the moment of reckoning is approaching with regards to the U.S. mediation in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In London, in a few days, the United States will outline its final proposal for a peace agreement and a peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine. And it seems that so far the provisions of this framework is not satisfactory to the Ukrainians or to the Russians, but of course way more dissatisfactory to the Ukrainians than it is to the Russians. And it seems that President Trump is growing tired of mediating this conflict. He hinted, he as well as Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that they might withdraw from the mediation of the conflict, and in this case, Ukraine is not eager to the United States vanishing out of the picture, and Russia does not want to suffer the United States' wrath if the mediation fails. So what Putin is doing, he is giving an indication that he is more committed to a ceasefire and to peace talks than his Ukrainian counterparts. Therefore, if the framework agreement or the framework proposal proposed by the United States fails to deliver to their interests and is rejected by either party and the peace negotiations fail, then Ukraine and Europe will be left to their own devices to face Russia without U.S. intervention, because basically Putin is buying Trump's favor. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have taken advantage of that rather smartly. At first, President Zelensky rejected the ceasefire, and that, of course, would have been catastrophic. However, he accepted later on and said that the Foreign Minister Sibiha of Ukraine said they want to extend it to 30 days and not only to 3 days. So we are seeing both parties trying to cap on the current ceasefire that has taken effect, basically despite the violations. And I think we might be closer now to a ceasefire at least, and to a more calmer phase of the Ukrainian conflict than we were before. But of course, skepticism remains.
So how do you interpret the truce? Dr. Mohammed talked about the idea that, these are just basically political games. Especially that Putin now has said that Kiev's response would shed light on Ukraine's willingness to actually take part in real negotiations to end the war. Each person is trying to throw the ball on the other person's court, basically.
Greetings to you, greetings to Dr. Mohammed Osman, of course, greetings to audience. Russia needs to react on statement of the United States of America that say that they need some constructivity in talks about peace. Now, when they see no constructivity from Russia, because initially Ukraine supported the US idea about 30 days ceasefire, but during these 30 days happened attack on, first of all, children playground in city Kryvyi Rih, after which 9 children was murdered and 20 person at all was murdered. Then was strike on Sumy, where 35 person was murdered, and several attacks on Dnipro, on Sumy one more time, on Kharkov city, where 120 person was injured. So we see that Russia, on the one hand, say that they are ready for peace, but on their actions, there is no readiness. Even now, when Russia said that, oh, we really need peace, and we proposed this Easter ceasefire, but what happened after that statement of Mr. Putin? Several hours after that, I hear in Kiev the air alarm because Russian drone attacked the city where I live, capital of Ukraine, Kiev. As for today, according to our president's statement, from the beginning of this Easter till 4 o'clock Ukrainian time, Russia made 46 assaults across various directions. And they murdered several of our soldiers, and the attacks still go on. So I think that on they don't need this peace because they don't believe that this actually will be, and I'm not believe in peace after the end, as President Zelensky proposed. Thank you.
Mr. Osman, you heard Mr. Us there. He's also very skeptical of this possible ceasefire. How does Russia intend to enforce a ceasefire given the reports and the ongoing violations on the front lines, especially the ones that, Mr. Us had identified right there?
True, President Zelensky said that violations are being committed by the Russian side. According to him, about 400 artillery strikes and about a few drone strikes here and there. And of course, I think this is true because it's very hard to stabilize a ceasefire in such a very short notice. And on the other hand, the Russian Ministry of Defense as well has documented Ukrainian violations of the ceasefire. So it's basically reciprocal. And who started the violations, of course, it cannot be really documented because we have to take into account that the entire front line between Russia and Ukraine runs for about over 1,500 kilometers. So that's a huge piece of land that cannot be adequately monitored by everyone. And of course, there is an absolute absence of trust between the Russian and the Ukrainian sides. So of course, we cannot attest to the credence or the truthfulness of the statements of either side. There is, of course, a margin of falsehoods that are propagated by both. However, I do see that it is within the vested interest of Ukraine to pursue any trajectory or roadmap that lead to a cessation of hostility and a long in Ukraine. Let's be realistic. This conflict will never be resolved definitively by the way Trump is managing it, because basically he's not taking the historical grievances of both sides into account.
So concessions must be made, basically, to reach a deal.
Yes, but so far the party that is required, because of the situation on the battlefield and because of the behavior of the Trump administration side, Bankova cannot count on the White House anymore. Trump does not view Ukraine as an ally. He hardly believes even in the European security structure that has been erected after the World War II, NATO and whatnot. He is not really interested in investing in that anymore. And he does not see Russia as a historical enemy of the United States, as previous administrations have done. So that's the problem that the Ukrainians have to reckon with. And unfortunately, what happened in the White Summit between Trump and Zelensky that ended with Trump kicking Zelensky out of the White House, the Ukrainians failed to grasp the United States of Trump is not the United States of Biden and Obama, even the first Trump administration. He does not view Russia as an enemy. So you take what you can take. You can take a deal that will preserve whatever remains of Ukraine, a country that has been shattered and destroyed by war. What Mr. Us has mentioned about the very tragic events that happened, whether in Sumy or in Dnipro or other cities where children died due to missile strikes, this suffering needs to end. And at the end of the day, it has been proven rather definitively that no matter how much military aid Ukraine will receive, they will not be able to inflict a battlefield defeat on Russia. They will not be able to retrieve all the territories that Russia has occupied. If anything, Russia is advancing inside Ukraine now, whether in Pokrovsk, in Kupiansk, even in Sumy itself, beyond Kursk and inside Russia. So the situation is not on the side of the Ukrainians at the moment, and the Europeans cannot plug the gap of the absence of U.S. support. The Europeans do not have a military industrial capacity to supply their own needs and Ukraine's needs in a war where Ukraine is fighting the second largest and strongest army in the world. So it's really inconceivable to think that way.
Yes.
So I think that peace, there is a chance, even though it's peace, it might. But even a short-term peace is better than a never-ending war.
Okay, Mr. Us, you heard Mr. Osman there talking about the idea that, the Ukrainians are probably going to have to give the biggest concessions. But does Kyiv believe that Washington's potential concessions on Crimea reflect a shifting U.S. priority over Ukrainian sovereignty? And what do you think is the fate of the war would be if the U.S. did withdraw from mediating a resolution? You've heard Dr. Osman also talk about the idea of military aid and military supplies from the U.S.
Absolutely agree with Dr. Osman that Europe is not ready, and that's the main problem. Because initially, the main problem of Europe, that after the end of the Second World War, Europe decided to spend more money on their security, being sure that the United States of America always can come and help them in any threat. But what do we see now? The United States of America said that they will not help to Europe. Furthermore, they even talk about Greenland. So it means that Europe could not even receiving support from US. Europe could receive attack from US, attack on their territory of the European Union country then. So that's why, as for me, the main question for Europe to really rebuild its military production. For 3 years, even practically we have the fourth year of full-scale war, Europe increased production of weapons only at 30%.
Yes.
I think that they should do more. And as for concession from Ukraine side, we are not ready to recognize each part of our territory, including Crimea. Not only Ukraine, for example, our partners, and not only Europe, actually. We should understand that we have such a good partner
But
like
what if
Turkey.
this is the only way out for the Ukrainians, I suppose, to end the violence itself? Is this something that the Ukrainian government is willing to discuss, at least in part?
Yes, actually, but this violence can be finished for me due to one moment, due to moment of collapse of Russian economy. I still think that the problem in Russian economy is the same thing that actually make a dot in the story of the Soviet Union. No one attacked Soviet Union, but it disappeared to economy. The same situation could be now. Russia like to say that everything okay in their economy, but now we have first quarter, and they have the deficit of their budget practically 3 trillion rubles. They expected to have deficit 1.3 at the end of this year, but they have practically 3 trillion after first quarter. It means that really they have problems, and the task for Ukraine just to stay at least till the end of this year, because closer to the end of this year there will be economic problems in Russia, And Russia will not think about war versus Ukraine because they need to, first of all, secure their economy, their country, because economic problems mean threats of large quantity of internal conflicts and of separatism of many Russian regions. And after that, Ukraine will not war against Ukraine will not be their priority, and that is a chance for Ukraine to receive final peace. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Osman, earlier in our discussions, we talked about, or you talked about, the idea that Putin's truce is an attempt to preempt international pressure amid the stalled peace talks. Next move, I suppose, here for the Russians to, move forward with peace talks, or are they going to continue to attempt to show these minor concessions, like these little truces here and there?
Oh, this is not even a concession, Graham. This is just a maneuver by President Putin. And I think President Putin would actually love it, if the Ukrainians decide not to accept his gesture and his ceasefire. He wishes that this would happen because it will make the Ukrainians appear to the Americans as a party that is not interested in Trump's initiative. By that, they are injuring Trump's pride and ego. And Putin is a master manipulator, and I think we can all agree on that. And what will follow that will be a spring offensive, that is a spring-summer offensive by the Russian army. Many reports, including even by American and European military and defense institutes, that the Russians are mobilizing troops and equipment in Zaporozhye and in the region, as well as southern Kharkiv, in order to launch new offensives and capture more territories inside Ukraine, even beyond the four oblasts that have been annexed by Russia. And the Russian army now is 2 kilometers away from the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, for example. So if Russia extends its areas of control into other parts of Ukraine and captures more territory, and this in tandem with the absence provided by the Biden administration are about to run out, the final installments will be given by the United States over the next few weeks, and then there will be no more aid from the United States. And Europe, as we said, and even Mr. Us agreed, will not be able to provide adequate military support. So then they will go back to a negotiating table in a few months, just with Ukraine in a much weaker position and with much more concessions to give that will hamper its sovereignty further. And I know Mr. Us is an economist, and I'm a big fan of his professional commentary, and he knows that. However, I do disagree with him on the part of the Russian economy being on the verge of collapse. We have read many reports at the beginning of this war that the Russian economy will crumble and will be destroyed within a few months. If anything, after 3 years, the Russian economy is growing. China is giving them a sustained lifeline by buying humongous amounts of energy, costing billions, tens of billions of dollars. And Russia, of course, is very well integrated into the trade structure with the global south in general. And even some European countries like Slovakia and others are interested in once again buying Russian cheap energy, because Europe is on the verge of an economic crisis. And even just a few days ago, the European Union vetoed a resolution at the end of the day that was proposing cutting Russian European purchases of Russian liquefied natural gas. They backed down from
Mr. Osman, because we're short on time, if we could just also get...
I do not see any indicators of the Russian economy collapsing soon, Rehan. That's my point.
I'm sorry, I had to cut you off there. It's just we need to get also Mr. Us's opinion on this, on what you just said, because we're running out of time. Sir, Mr. Us, what signals is Ukraine sending by rejecting the truce while offering a 30-day ceasefire proposal? You heard Mr. Osman, he does not totally agree with you when it comes to the Russian economy, but again, the Ukrainian economy must be hurt badly after years of fighting.
Of course, Ukrainian economy hardly actually threatened by the a lot of crisis, and of course we understand that the situation is not the best, but Ukraine at least have partners in European Union, in Japan, in South Korea, in Canada. So it means that we have some forces that can help economically to our economy to survive. As for Russia, Russia have no such allies like Europe or Japan or South Korea. Of course, Russia has Northern Korea. Northern Korea gives a lot of shells, gives a lot of soldiers, but not economy. As for Russia, of course, Russian economy based on oil, and you know that according to Russian budget, the oil price should be $69.7 per barrel. As for Russian, the price for Russian oil now, 55 or so dollars. It means euros, not Brent, because Brent more expensive than euros. And that's why Russia are not receiving less money than they expect. Of course, they're receiving money. I agree with that. Nevertheless,
Yes.
why I mentioned about deficit of their budget,
Well-
because Russian reserves is the same as their budget, and you understand that
Well,
when
I
you
guess
have no
time
reserves,
will
yeah.
sort of tell us there, but we're sort of out of time. But thank you both for joining us. That was Mr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist, and Mr. Ivan Us, an advisor of the Ukraine National Center. Thank you both for your insights and this discussion. Thank you so much. Amid the skepticism and strategic gambits, Putin's Easter truce leaves the world questioning its true intent. As artillery echoes persist, trust remains fragile. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of this ever-changing world. I'm Rehan Morsi. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more on Qnews.